Welcome to West Coast Focus, sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County. I'm your host, Steve Zmak, and today's show is all about portrait photography. This is a special episode of West Coast Focus, coming to you straight from the gallery at the Historic Center for Photographic Art in Carmel, California, where we are surrounded by their annual 8x10 exhibition and drawing to benefit the center. The exhibit runs through November 4th, so be sure to get over here to see it and support this great nonprofit organization. Portrait photography is more than just a selfie or headshot. It tells a story about a person or event in a single illustrative moment frozen in time. The portraitist is a master manipulator of both natural and artificial lighting, leaving little to chance. They are skilled at interacting with their subjects in a way that reveals both their own and their subjects' personalities. The environmental portrait captures the human species like wildlife in their natural habitat, while every detail of the studio portrait is with intention and by design. The conversation between subject and photographer in a portrait session is more equal and balanced than any other type of photography that tends to be dominated by the artist with a passive, posed, or manipulated subject. The four photographers we'll be talking to today are all at the top of their field, yet very different in their approach, style, and experience. Our first guest was also a panelist on the fourth episode of West Coast Focus, showing his exquisite black and white underwater fine art photography. He began freediving in 1984 and earned a spot on the U.S. freedive team. He competed professionally for 5 years in waters all around the world and held several U.S. records in depth diving and breath holding for time, 7 minutes, and of course, with a camera in hand. Today, we get to see a completely different side of his artistry and one balanced between black and white and color imagery. His award-winning blend of modern elegance and photojournalistic storytelling delivers images that are captured with a fine art aesthetic and strong emotional content. He's been featured on National Geographic TV, and his photos have been published in numerous periodicals, including Town & Country, Gourmet, and the covers of Central Coast Bride. He shot hundreds of weddings on the Central Coast and destination weddings throughout the world. I'm thrilled to be able to show you even more of this Monterey Bay favorite. Welcome back, Scott Campbell.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Like George O'Keeffe, our next guest was a late-blooming artist and started her photography career at age 50. It began with her taking art and painting lessons from Russian and Ukrainian master painters Lana Lukienko and Olga Perry, trained in the classic Eastern European style. For a few years, every Saturday, she studied art and art philosophy with them until she developed her own unique style. Then one day, she picked up a camera. I interviewed her for the 7th episode of West Coast Focus about photography clubs because she is the administrator for the Facebook group Monterey Photography, MoPho, that is just about to hit 2,000 members. Her photos have appeared in numerous publications such as Cosmopolitan, Vogue, New York Post, Allure, and Carmel, and featured on the TV shows Access Hollywood, MSNBC's Today Show, and NBC's New York Live. She considers herself a fine art conceptual photographer, primarily practicing portraiture and fashion photography, but starting to dabble more in landscape and abstract. Christine Holding is in the gallery today. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Steve, for having me.
Our next guest studied art and design at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with an emphasis on graphic design. While there, he split his head open his first time in a darkroom, so he's happily had a digital camera in his hands as early as 1997 while working for Casio. He was a founder and art director for 10 years for Wave, a print and digital lifestyle and entertainment magazine out of San Jose that he shot and designed nearly every cover. He also did considerable editorial work and shoots for the advertisers, which gave him a diverse experience. He then transitioned to his own full-time studio in Santa Cruz. He averages 175 commercial shoots a year, including 25 to 35 weddings. He has more than 140 5-star reviews on Yelp, and he has a perfect 5 out of 5 score after more than 60 reviews on Wedding Wire. We both shot for the ad agency Vertical Rail in Aptos, but just met in person for the first time today. I'm thrilled to have Chris Schmauch on the panel. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Steve. Nice to be here. Thanks.
So why did you select portraiture and people as your subject? What inspires you about this, and what are you celebrating with your art? Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I think it kind of found me. I mean, I don't know how, normally people take landscape photos and it develops from there, but I fell into an editorial job, and they would send me out to shoot people, and it was fascinating. I had my little Hasselblad, one flash, and a Polaroid back, and that's how it started.
One thing I find so fascinating about shooting people is every shoot is so completely different. It's not like going out to your same favorite beach in Big Sur and the sunset changes a little. I mean, the personalities of the people who you work with are just across the spectrum. So that has to keep it, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other elements that come into it, the style of how you shoot that. I mean, the variables of if you're shooting a person that you need to satisfy an editorial publisher or ad agency, you have to bring in the mix of what they want, what the client wants, and also what your signature is too.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, that the client isn't always the person who you're taking the photo of. It could be another person who's going to be using that photo.
Absolutely.
Christine, why portraiture for you?
I fell in love with faces and people and eyes and the details. Like to incorporate part of their personality into the photos, and I like to get close up with them.
Would you say that you're celebrating these people from your
Absolutely,
photography?
absolutely celebrating them. Absolutely.
Have you ever had an instance where you weren't so enthusiastic about celebrating the person you're photographing?
Believe it or not, I usually can get to them. It's usually the harder photos are when they're very nervous, and so keeping them calm, and I have tricks that I use. I make them close their eyes and then relax a little and then tell them when to open them, and that helps a lot, But no, I usually am able to capture them pretty well.
Chris, why did you select people?
Yeah, well, I've shot a lot of different types of subjects over the years, and I feel like part of the thrill of photography is the challenge, and the more challenging something is, then the greater the reward. And so I think, if I was to choose between shooting food in a studio for an hour versus you have 15 minutes to get awesome photos of my crazy family, these 3 kids running around, if I can do that and do it well, then the satisfaction I get from that, and from creating those memories for the parents as well, it's pretty awesome. So.
Yeah, I see the family shot you did of yourself, or one of your kids is being flipped upside down in the air.
I got to control them somehow. Made for a good shot.
Right. Beware what you get into if you're modeling for you. You might have
Exactly.
to do some gymnastics, right? Well, let's talk about your techniques for putting your models at ease and bringing out their inner selves. Christine, you mentioned a few tricks. Can you elaborate further on that?
Well, I definitely give them clear direction. I'm kind of bossy when it comes to being on set. I let them know what the concept is way in advance, using, of course, styling and makeup to enhance those concepts, and talk with the model. And so, I'm always telling them, put yourself in this space. You're this person now. Say if we do the Arte shoot, Arte style shoot, I have them research and look at the art of Arte, and so they can kind of get a general idea of what I'm looking for. So I do get kind of bossy on set that way, but at the same time, I want them as comfortable as possible. So I do joke around and, try to help them be at ease. So.
Chris.
Like Christine, I use a lot of the same techniques, closing the eyes, resetting the face, make sure you're not smiling, shaking out the shoulders, deep breathing. It's almost like a yoga session just to kind of set people at ease. And you can do that whether it's one person or a big formal group at a wedding. The same techniques works, and I feel like the other thing is, using 90% of your attention on your subjects to make them feel comfortable. I think it's super important, and that's something that only comes with experience and having all that technical stuff in the background, and you're not even thinking about shutter speed and all that kind of stuff. So being able to put all of your attention on your clients is super important.
Scott.
I think I have to approach each one, by the personality of the person we're working with. And I think if I talk to them and find a common interest, and then share with them what we're doing. That there's a desensitizing period that happens when they start to become comfortable with the camera, and then that's when we start working.
I like to use a lot of flattery in there. I find that really warms them up and brings their personality out. But a lot of humor up front, and usually I'm making fun of myself, and that just gets them to loosen up and relax. Well, let's talk about what equipment and post-processing that you like to use. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, we're pretty much digital now, but I've used everything from 8x10 and Polaroids to the digital cameras that we use today. So, and to be honest with you, we do such a volume of work that I do have a production person that can handle most of it. I wish I did more of my personal work and used more film cameras as I do in the underwater work, but just a variety of cameras. It's all digital now, though.
Do you ever have a second camera on your shoots that if someone's using a film camera for that?
No. We've got so many film cameras at the studio. I love to bring them out once in a while and put film in them, but nothing ever seems to come of it. We test them, and then a job doesn't come along that we use them, though.
And what about your post-process?
Well, everything's color corrected in Lightroom, and then it's edited and culled, and then it's cataloged, and then the culling happens, and we pick the edits that we like, and sometimes I tweak the ones that are my hero shots, and then the rest of the work is done by my production guy.
Christine, what do you use?
I use a Nikon D7000. I use strobes, pocket wizards. Well, however, I do natural light shooting too. So with natural light shooting, I'm using scrims and reflectors, and I use Lightroom for cataloging, and then I use Photoshop for the finished work.
Because you do a lot of compositing.
I do.
That you can't do in Lightroom.
I do.
Right. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, my workflow is kind of the opposite of Christine's, where I'm trying to do like 90% of the work on site. Most of my shoots are on location. If the natural light's good, I'll use that. If it's not, then I'll bring my light. I usually use Photo gear to complement my Team Nikon bodies. I usually have two on my hip, a wide angle on one and telephoto on the other, and and then I process everything in Lightroom, about 10,000 photos a month. The culling takes me longer than the actual editing.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a hard thing for us a lot. If I can get my wife to do it, she'll do it for me. But that's my process.
That's good. Okay, well, it's time to see some of our guests' great photography. Now for your viewing pleasure, we have slideshows of Scott Campbell's and Christine Holding's photography to the original guitar stylings of Pacific Grove's own Bill Speck. Enjoy, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes. West Coast Focus is sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County through a cultural grant to fund all of our 2018 productions. West Coast Focus has an extra special connection to the Arts Council because Ansel Adams in 1982 led civic, arts, and business leaders to create this agency as part of a nationwide movement powered by the National Endowment for the Arts. The mission of the Arts Council for Monterey County is to improve the quality of life for everyone in our region through the arts. So please describe your process of how you collaborate with your model, with your subject, and sometimes hopefully it's a one-on-one process, but in the instance that you do have a third person in there as like an art director or a separate client. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of my portrait clients are really leaning on me to kind of bring my expertise, and really all they need to do is show up. They're not models. They don't necessarily feel comfortable in front of the camera, and so they really want to be led through the shoot, and so that's when I kind of put my director hat on and lead them through that process in a way that's kind of fun, easygoing, and not forced. If it's more of a commercial shoot, then I'm going in there with like kind of a storyboard to go off of, and a lot of back and forth looking at the camera, or if we're shooting tethered, looking at laptops with an art director to kind of make sure that we're going in the direction they want to go. But the vast majority of the stuff, especially for portraiture, is just me and whoever my subjects are.
No, so how complex is your storyboard? Like how much detail do you go into?
A lot of times it might just involve like sample photos from the web that they're like, this is the type of look, whether it's lighting or props or whatever. I don't stop, I'm not a stylist or a prop guy, but you put it in there with someone that knows what they're doing. I'm happy to do tweaks and variations of that.
How long do you usually keep your subjects on location and working for like a typical engagement shot?
An hour at most, honestly. I used to take a lot longer with people, but I feel like with experience, I can kind of cycle through what I want to do and what I want to achieve in a more efficient manner, so it doesn't take long.
Christine, how about you?
Well, usually I come up with a concept and I hire a model for that concept, and a lot of times I'm doing my own styling. I'll find stuff from Goodwill, used clothing stores, or even some of the local designers might make something for me. And then from that point, I hire hair, makeup. I can't do everything, but I'm usually the art director on set. I have worked with art directors, and we do collaborate and have a clear understanding of what type of shoot or look that we're looking for in the shot.
Now for your conceptual work, is the concept 100% you? You've got your storyboard and the model is just your silly putty?
Well, that's how it first started out, but it's morphed into clients come to me with concepts. So they love it that they can think of an idea and come to me with a concept, and I sit down with the client and we storyboard the look.
And how advanced is your storyboard? How detailed? Is it a sketch, or are you doing a rough composite?
Well, my sketch is stick figure to do it quickly, but because I am compositing, I do want to know somewhat where I'm going to have placement of furniture or props, and that's usually for a client. I go that far, and then sometimes I just say forget it. I'm going to freewheel it and not storyboard it, but I know the concept and shoot just from the hip, basically. Depends.
Scott?
Well, it's a really broad spectrum of people you shoot and how you approach it is differently. In terms of, if we're talking about commercial work, usually if we've worked with a client together before, they give you minimum work, they're confident in what you're going to bring. But a lot of times, sometimes you'll go to a shoot and you'll meet somebody, you have a concept about it, and then it's 360. It's like you just try a bunch of different things and until you get what you get. But a lot of times they'll start directing you too, and sometimes you go with the flow. After you've got what they like, then you mix it up a little bit for yourself, and you just kind of have to work with people according to what they think they want.
I find if I'm doing something very conceptual, like a book cover or a CD cover, then I'm storyboarding, I'm sketching out with pencil, and I actually bring the sketchbook to the meeting, and I'm sketching, and they're commenting and guiding the sketching.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
I usually send my clients to Pinterest. There's a website called Pinterest. And I tell them, go onto Pinterest and start looking at photos and pick out the ones or tag the ones that you like and or you want the shoot to look like. And so they'll get like 5 or 10 photos of different photographers or pictures they find, and then I have a general idea what they're looking for.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
If I have a bride that comes to me with like 10 pages of Pinterest photos, I will not take that bride as a client.
Really?
Because she'd be too demanding?
It's too crazy. It's like, look at like, if you're an open book with your work, that should be like set the expectations for what you're willing to do. I just see that as a red flag.
Interesting.
To me, it's knowing getting a general idea of a look.
I think it's your responsibility as a photographer to tell your client who has these unrealistic expectations if for example, it was a bride and they're showing you all these photos, yet they don't want to go on the grass with their dress or this or that. So I think hopefully ahead of time you guys have talked about that a little bit, and you're right, some of these brides shouldn't be, we shouldn't take them.
Well, I guess I do a different kind of photography.
Sure.
Yeah. And some of them, like I mentioned Urte, who is a 1920s, 30 artist, very famous. He has a certain style. Half the people didn't know who he was. So I had to go take a look at your art books, go to your library. And so it's really an art education for them as well as myself, because I do a lot of research on a style that I want to capture and read every book I can find on what they did. And so
I go in and I say, it's my job to make you look the best you possibly can. I am going to celebrate you through this photograph, and that usually okay, I will put my image in your hands for a few moments. Chris, what was the most memorable portrait shoot you've done?
Well, because my memory is not so good, which is why I take pictures, I have to go back maybe 3 weeks. And I had a couple that got married at the courthouse. I didn't shoot that, but they wanted to capture, shots of them at the beach, and it kind of turned into a trash the dress session. So the very last shot was at Panther Beach on the west side of Santa Cruz, and there was one rock where waves were just crashing epically behind it. And so I made sure it was safe, put them on it, staged them, waited 5 minutes for the wave, because as soon as you're waiting for a wave, it never comes. But had on high-speed continuous and got an amazing shot, and I'll have to send this to you because I didn't share it, but of just the wave crashing over them, and just amazing. So
wow.
Whenever art and nature intersect in crazy ways, it's kind of a fun thing to capture.
And you do that. I'd say that is a signature part of your style, is you're combining these grand wide-angle landscape shots. And then you have your models in them, as a part of this greater scheme. But then the timing of the water rushing up the beach, or the wave breaking behind them, and of course the sunset or twilight lighting as well.
Yeah, you never know if it's going to be foggy or if you're going to have an actual sunset, so you kind of got to be prepared for all the situations. But I tell people this is all about them for the most part, and the landscape, in general is backdrop. It's not as important, but then there are the shots where, the two come together in a way that, is the sum is greater than the individual parts, which is nice.
Christine?
Well, mine is anytime I work with my favorite muse, Laura New Myers. I mean, every shoot concept that we do together turns out beautifully, and it just makes me so happy. Yeah.
Scott?
Well, actually, I did some work for a hotel, and 2 instances. One, they sent, one of the board members over to be photographed, and he came in and said, "You're going to have a hard time. The last guy that photographed me was pretty good." And I said, "Well, who was that?" "It was Karsh." So that challenged me. But a second shot for the hospital we did was they used to call me for covers for their magazines that would go out, and the magazine would go to donors, and it was sensitive what you put on the cover, especially if it was a breast cancer issue. And that's what it was. So they came to me and asked me, we need to show something which represents a breast, but at the same time not show too much. So it was a challenge, but I took it on. We actually shot at 8x10, and there was no Photoshop back in those days. We shot Polaroid. We soaked the Polaroids and pulled the emulsion off, put it on watercolor paper, and massaged it around And the thing that really hit me about it was we used the model as my girlfriend. She was beautiful, and I shot her from the side, and 2 years later she had a double mastectomy. So that hit home.
One day in 1998, I received a postcard from a local commercial photographer showing off his portrait work. I was thinking about the design for the next Cal State Monterey Bay student recruitment view book, and one of the styles on the postcard hit the mark. That photographer was Randy Tunnell, and we've been friends and colleagues ever since. I can't even tell you how much I've learned from Randy over the last 20 years, accompanying him on big shoots as his second camera with such clients as Apple, Google, and Stanford University. Last month, I had the privilege of interviewing him in his home studio here in Carmel.
I'll say the thing that drew me to portraits, I think, and people was working, well, I volunteered at what was then the Friends of Photography Gallery. It's now Center for Photographic Arts, and same room. So I volunteered to hang shows and do stuff there to be close to the stuff. And I met Ansel Adams in one of the shows there, and I was always like, big backpacker, big, John Muir fan, big, outdoors fan, loved landscapes, and did a lot of that kind of work because I was really into it, and realized that there's no way I can do landscapes as beautiful as this. It was the 70s, and after all, the environment's ruined now. The forests are never going to be as beautiful as when Ansel Adams was doing his primary photography. So it made me pivot toward people. Oh, Annie Leibovitz, yeah, big time. In fact, she agreed to critique my senior project at a school. So that was a huge coup, and I was really thrilled about that. I've always drawn a lot of inspiration from her her staging and her eye and her humor, and so I big time enjoyed her work a great deal. That's, in a way, it's one of the reasons why I was always happy that I pivoted toward human beings and portraiture, because really the access and the proximity to human beings, that famous people or interesting people, it became possible. And as a photographer, you'll always get the best seat because they want you to be able to see it. They want you to get like the best view of what's going on. And so in that way, I've had the opportunity to be invited into boardrooms and homes and just different workspaces and behind the scenes green room situations that I would never be invited to witness and see. And so I've sat ringside for Muhammad Ali fights, and I've been in rooms with presidential candidates, and I've been in Ann Lander's home and Mavis Staples' home, and different places that were it not for still photography, I would never have these opportunities. And so sometimes it's just being close to power. I've had opportunities to photograph presidents, and senators and individuals. I had a couple of sittings with Oprah Winfrey. I mentioned Muhammad Ali. I had 90 minutes with Muhammad Ali, with just me, his wife, and his manager, and it was just like a ridiculously fun and interesting event. I mean, to be the captive audience of Muhammad Ali was like just so much fun, because he's, I mean, he filled the room. I mean, it was so obvious why he was the most recognizable human being on the planet, and you know, and that was a real thrill. And he would walk in the room, and I actually saw him at another event where this is part of his shtick. He would walk in and go, "Hi, I'm Joe Louis," and you know, that was his entry. Interestingly enough, I was at Joe Louis's home. Here locally, I worked on a project with Congressman Sam Farr that was an extensive project, about 2 years, and no fewer than 50 sittings. And we went district-wide for 2 years. We did a lot of traveling together, and I got to know him really well, and it became, you know, really a lovely project. We put together a book for his that coincided with his retirement. But I have met our local premier photographers because I've had to take their photograph. I met Douglas Stakely because I had to do a picture of him for a healthcare issue that was a magazine portrait of him. I met Tom O'Neill because I had to do an article about him, which was, you know, it's really fun to turn the tables on a photographer and have to photograph him. So Judy Dater, I had to do a photograph of her once. So I mean, and the Westons, I've photographed Kim and Cole when I was doing a seminar with Cole years ago, and then I've become a big fan of Kim and photographed he and Zmak for the Westons 4 Up show. I was really thrilled to be asked to do their portrait, and that made me feel very appreciated. And so that was, again, photographing photographers, which is like, you know, kind of a fun, as you are fully aware. Really, you know, I've been doing photography for quite a while, and so over the years I've had the opportunity and the function to photograph anything that you could name. So really, I'm pretty eclectic. I've had a little training and a little experience in a wide range of photography. So I feel comfortable in a number of arenas. So it's really, you know, one of the ways we used to put it is like, you say yes, and then you walk away and try to figure out, how am I going to do this? So I'm comfortable and happy to do a variety of photography. That's one of the joys, I think. Being self-employed, being a contract shooter, and being a location shooter primarily, I'm happy to work studio work, but really not as happy as I am to be doing commercial location work. You have to find the place. You're out there in whatever situation, environment that is appropriate. Requires you to assess a scene instantly, and like I said, before you get the best seat, you get access to things and places that are unique to, well, and plus they're of some notoriety, there's something interesting going on there, or a photograph wouldn't be required. So in all those things, I just I love to take photographs. I love to take pictures. I love the challenges that different subjects bring, and it beats working. So in that way, I'm happy to do a lot of different kinds of shooting. Yeah.
You can see more of Randy's great photography on his website, randytunnell.com, and I encourage you to look deeper into all of our guest websites because we're only scratching the surface here. Okay, so Scott, does your underwater work and your portrait work, or are we seeing any overlap there yet?
I take a couple assignments of underwater work with people, but I don't generally do very much of it. But I will say this, that if you look at my work, my underwater work with fish, that you will see a personality coming out of those images.
Absolutely. I'm, being a wildlife photographer, that's how I see it, is I'm taking portraits of these animals. And it is a collaboration. We are making contact, and a lot of the instances is, okay, you can take this photo, I will not kill you, Or others of just better just to move along and find another piece of wildlife. Chris, we get a lot of drama in these big landscapes with your models in it, and often you're tilting your horizon. How does that add to the drama of the image?
Well, it's funny when I saw that question because I'm actually pretty anal about not tilting stuff, and it made me think about it where we were talking earlier how some shots of, where the people are small in the photo and it's more of a landscape and vice versa. I think I'm more often tilting when my subject, I want to draw the eye more towards the couple, the people, the person, the subject. So I'm more willing to kind of sacrifice the horizon in that regard, but when it's more of a broad landscape and the people are small, then I think it's more critical that you have a visual horizon. So I think if it's more than if it's close to even, then I will want to straighten it, but if it's way off, so be it, it's artistic.
Because it usually, you'll put your subjects way off to the side, so it really acts as a very dramatic leading line in there, and often you've got wind blowing dresses and hairs and a wave breaking, and so there's a lot of action to it, and I think that
I like the drama coming from the landscape and not from actual subjects, because that would be a pain.
Christine, how about you?
Well, I've done a lot of musicians. I've actually shot a lot of CDs, portraits of musicians for their work, and especially for musicians because they like to be a little edgy. I like to throw away the rule book, and I do something that's called freestyling. I call it freestyling, and it's just that I totally ignore the horizon line, and again try to, like he said, draw the lines to the subject. And I'll take my camera, not even look at the back of it, and actually shoot up and over and around, and my eye is not even looking at what I'm getting. I'll do that for about the last quarter of a shoot, and I've gotten some amazing perspectives. So really it's just about playing, experimenting, and getting different perspectives.
Master the rules and then shatter them.
Master them and then break them.
Right. I find in my work that freestyling, I like that term. I've never put a label on it, but I kind of, let my vision go a little bit blurry. And I'm not seeing a horizon, I'm not seeing my model. All I'm seeing is light and dark composition. It's almost like I'm framing up a nature abstract photo. And then, just click away. And then when I get it in post-production, throw most of them out.
Right.
But some are like, wow, okay. Yes. I really like how this works. Yeah. Okay, it's time to see some more photography from Chris Schmauch and myself. Of course to the original music of Bill Specht. We'll see you back here in a few minutes to continue the discussion. Welcome back to our discussion on portrait photography, sponsored by the Arts Council for Monterey County. So, portraits, do portraits have to be posed, or can they be candid moments that are just you take advantage of something spontaneous? And if both are acceptable as portraits to you, do you have a preference for one side? Do you gain better results out of one method or the other? Go ahead, Chris.
think it really depends on the context and the purpose of the shoot. You know, if someone's coming to you for a business headshot to use on LinkedIn, then it's got to be staged and lit well. But if you're just looking for awesome portraits of people at an event, you know, I think we appreciate candid photos of other people. But if it's something that we want for ourselves, then we don't want it to be candid. We rarely like candid photos of ourselves, but that's how everyone else sees us, so that's what they like.
Do you ever have to pose your models or subjects in a way that they have to look candid? And is that easy to do?
I think the forced candid doesn't really work. I think it's easier to like create a candid moment from practice, you know, whether it's like you know, something you say to set someone at ease, or just by kind of being, you know, put the camera down and just talk for a while. Or if you just pretend that you're like actually setting up your lighting and getting that dialed in, but you're actually like all dialed in already and getting the moments. I think that works better with like groups of people, like if it's a bridal party or something like that. Just getting the interaction between them as opposed to like an individual person, which is a little more challenging.
Christine, what do you think?
I actually am looking for those candid shots. Those are the prime cream of the crop. You get the real emotion in those shots, and a lot of times I have a lot of people on set. I'll have hair and makeup and maybe other photographers, and I get them to distract the model and actually try to shoot them when they are looking away at somebody else, or, you know, in the quiet moments in between things, and I love those shots.
When I was doing a bunch of shooting a bunch of students for Cal State Monterey Bay, you know, black and white background, wide angle lens from up on top of a ladder to really exaggerate their faces and their personalities. But you know, these kids are coming in there and they're really nervous and stuff. So I didn't have a great rapport style with my models then, but I would have like their friends would be there, and I would have their friends telling jokes, making fun of them, and I would just be clicking away. So it's, again, you know, building a candid situation that you can like go in and harvest those shots. But I always like to do both way, you know, do what you're paid to do. But often the favorite image out of the shoot for me will be one of those.
Well, I think there's two different ends of the spectrum. One I call a proactive approach, where the subject is also engaging with me, and the other end of the spectrum is what I call more of a reactive style, which is you're capturing moments that are happening, not interfering with what's going on. And over that spectrum, I think there should be an artistic element that blends with the whole spectrum, and an authenticity part of it too. So I like shooting them both, and I just try and mix it up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, different from, you know, landscape or nature photography, where it's really you just go out there and what's put in your path. But when you're doing portraiture, fashion work, commercial work, you're really you're posing. I mean, you have a vision in your mind, and you have to reach that vision. It's there's almost like an extra layer of creativity that has to take place there. So how many portraits do you estimate you've taken in your career?
Thousands. I have no idea. 30 years of it, so I couldn't tell you. But some memorable ones are, I mean, I've done a few celebrities. I mean, one that I didn't get to do, I shoot for this magazine out of LA, and it's whenever they need celebrity work up in the Bay Area, I shoot that. And we were going to get Sean Penn for the cover of the magazine. And he is really hard to get pinned down to do, and they only do work through the photographers that they use with the magazine. And so the publisher approached him and said, you know, it'll be really quick. He can take your portrait in the amount of time that you can hold your breath. So it didn't come about, but that was about 7 minutes.
Right, the 7-minute portrait, the 1 hour photo, the 7-minute portrait.
Exactly.
Christine?
My most recent one, Kiefer Sutherland, I got invited to, he has a band. So he's an actor as well as a musician, and I got to shoot him on stage with this band. And another interesting, I always estimate probably 1,000, 1,200 portraits, maybe something like that.
And that's in just a 7-year
Yeah,
period?
7 years.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
My most interesting shoot was I got invited by David Denny, who played with Steve Miller Band, to shoot up in the Bay Area at Golden Gate Park for the Summer of Love, and so I got to be on stage in front of 30,000 people, and that was quite interesting.
And you've been shooting the Big Sur fashion show, and you just shot that a couple days ago.
I have.
And you've been doing that almost from the beginning, and you
Almost,
have
not quite, but yeah.
So tell us about that.
Oh, that's just the most fun event ever to shoot. The creativity of all the models and the artists that create the dresses, the designers, the sets, everything is just so much fun. And so it's just a great fun event to shoot. So which isn't portrait shooting, but actually I kind of turn it into portrait shooting. It's event photography. But I go backstage and I do get them getting ready, and maybe after they got ready, and I do a lot of it portrait style. So.
Chris?
Yeah, when I got that question, I looked at my website to see how many photos I've got up there, and it's a little over 600,000. So I'm sure that translates into probably a few thousand, separate shoots, portraits. But in my time with the magazine, I would shoot a lot of local celebrities, whether they're mayors or chefs or just people that are movie stars. Not too many up here, but I think the most memorable one was shooting the author of The Martian. Can't remember his name at the moment, but shooting at a park, in Santa Clara, and putting him in like one of those circular cement tubes, and envisioning this kind of turning into a planetary, circular composition. And that was a lot of fun, because most shoots I don't go into with a preconceived idea, just kind of assess once I'm there, but that was a fun one to execute.
Well, what do you have coming up in the near future? Destinations, a new type of photography service you're adding to your portfolio?
We're sliding into booking season for weddings for next year, of course, and then all the family stuff, which will increase as we get closer to Christmas and people rush to get their photos taken. As I said earlier, I don't shoot on weekends unless it's weddings, but I'm actually exploring mini sessions, setting aside a few days. So Sunday, October 21st, I'm doing mini sessions at Capitola Beach, so mark your calendars.
So that's where you book a whole bunch of clients at once and
back,
just speed dating
Yep.
for photography.
Pretty much, yeah.
Good. Christine, what do you have coming up?
I think I'm going to publish a couple books on my photography. So that's what I'm looking at now, and want to increase the activity on the Monterey Bay photographers, the MoFos. I want to do a show with their art, so I want to curate a show. Yeah,
cool, fun.
So I want to talk to Sand City and maybe during West End, cross my fingers, maybe.
I like that.
So I want to get that going.
Scott, what's in your future?
Well, right now in the throes of the wedding season, and we are really busy with the corporate work right now, but we lace in little advertising jobs here and there, and we're about to push more of the headshot market a little bit too. So, and the family business is right on the edge of to be here, and I always look forward to photographing the same families over and over again, and seeing them grow, and it's great.
That's fun. Well, Salon Jane, the Ethereal Zone, is an exhibit at the Monterey Museum of Art of the work of 6 women West Coast photographers: Martha Casanave, Susan Hyde Green, Jane Olin, Anna Ream, Robin V. Robinson, and Robin Ward, 4 of which have appeared on this show, who all work outside the traditional sense of straight photography, experimenting and expanding their creativity with the support and honest feedback of the rest of the group. The exhibit runs September 20th to November 26th. The Roman Lawrence interview I recorded during his exhibit here at CPA earlier this year will be playing on a continuous loop throughout Roman's exhibit at the Ansel Adams Gallery in Yosemite, running through October 7th. You can watch the interview online. It is the first interview in the West Coast Focus Interviews on Location special released last month, a special edition of West Coast Focus, showcasing the interviews we've featured on our program over the last 2.5 years. And the program opens with Roman's interview. And be sure to get over here to the Center for Photographic Art at the Sunset Center in Carmel for a chance to take home one of these framed 8x10 prints and support the CPA. There are over 40 West Coast photographers represented in this show. Remember to get and post all your Monterey County photo event info at Monterey Peninsula Photo Events. That's mpenphotoevents.blogspot.com. That's our program. Thank you, Scott Campbell, Christine Holding, Chris Schmauch.
Thanks.
Thanks to Randy Tunnell for sharing his artistry with us, Bill Specht for the music, Michael Martins directing the show from the control room, and Mario Romo operating the cameras. A special thanks to Brian Taylor and Rick Marai here at the Center for Photographic Art, and of course, a big thank you to our sponsor, the Arts Council for Monterey County. You can view the past 16 episodes of West Coast Focus at your convenience at stevesmack.com, West Coast Focus TV, and as always, you have my word, you'll see at least 100 photos. We showed about 130 today. May your catch lights be bright and your models don't fidget too much. Thanks for focusing on the West Coast. Now get off the couch and tell someone's story.